Jay.
Hey, sorry I'm late. I couldn't find my Zoom link, so my apologies.
Quite all right. Well, I believe everybody who is planning on attending, at least that I've received registrations for, is logged in. So it is 6:04. I think we can probably get the meeting started.
Absolutely. So what should the first item, let me see, item on the agenda?
So I will begin, if it's okay, Sanjay, with just our communication about our modified meeting procedures.
Okay.
Great. So this is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, and I want to provide a few reminders to ensure the provisions of the Kansas Open Meetings Act are followed while following COVID-19 procedures. Board members and other participants must state their names and titles each time they speak. Various members of city staff are present via Zoom or in the audience here in person. We must also state our names and titles when we speak. All motions need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on board members individually to provide their vote. The chair will then announce whether or not the motion carried, as well as a count of the vote. The agenda for this meeting provided instructions for how to submit public comment and how it would be handled. We did receive at least one correspondence, which should be attached to tonight's agenda. And I know that we have at least one member of the public joining us by Zoom this evening. So the chair will call for in-person public comment for anybody without access to technology options. If people are present, then we will direct them to the podium to speak. And I'll let you know, Sanjay, if anybody does show up and would like to speak. So finally, I just want to remind everyone to please mute yourselves when you're not speaking.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. And our first duty is to welcome a new member, Mr. Miner. Mr. Miner, you want to introduce yourself to the board? Sorry, this is not in person, but at least virtually we get to know you. And thank you for coming on board.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm James. Well, let me start. I'm James Miner. I'm very happy to be on this board. I'm very glad you all selected me. I have been a Lawrence resident for more than almost 45 years. I am a Washburn-Ichabod graduate. My current line of work, or my past line of work, I think is a good fit for this type of position. I am skilled and knowledgeable in federal regulations, corporate regulations, all different types of things, whether it be quality and project management, process management. I have been, my past public experience, I was on the Community Development Advisory Board for several years, probably about almost 5 years. And it was a very enjoyable experience. I liked it a lot. We went through all the details of COMA and CORA, just like this board is. And I look forward to bringing a positive element to this, to the decisions made here today.
Thank you, board. Oh, this is Vice Chair Sanjay Mishra. Thank you, board member Miner. Thank you and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
So the second item on the agenda is for us to approve the minutes from the April 14th meeting. Any corrections? Then do we have a motion, please? Go, Marie.
Board member Marie Taylor, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
A second, please. You'll have to speak up, board member Santos.
This is board member Santos, second.
And I will call on people on my screen in the order. So board member Salvini,
This is Board Member Salvini. Aye.
Board Member Minor,
Aye.
Board Member Santos,
Board Member Santos, aye.
Board Member Taylor,
How do you raise a hand? And
Board
we will,
Member, Board Member
we
Marie.
will,
What?
okay, go ahead. Sorry, I wanted to respond to Michael. We will come to you, Mr. Ravi. Just a second. We are approving the minutes for our last meeting.
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board Member Littleton,
Board Member Littleton, I'll abstain. I was not present.
fine. And Board Member Mishra, aye. So we have 5 and 1 abstain. Is that on record, Brandon?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. So now for the public comment. I'm supposed to read the public comment language.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for helping me. So this is Board Member Mishra. The public is allowed to speak at public comment after first being recognized by the chair, except that any complaints or comments regarding individually identifiable officers are not allowed. Rather, any such comments or complaints may be provided to the board in writing, and the board will forward such comment or complaint to the appropriate person within the Lawrence Police Department. The board may establish reasonable limitations on the allowable length of public comment. As a general practice, the board will not discuss or debate these items, nor will it make decisions on items presented during this time. So with that, Brandon, do we invite public comment?
Yes. And so this is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. Anybody participating by Zoom, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand virtually or turn your camera on to let us know. And I see Alex Kerr.
how do I turn my camera on? God dang it.
May I do public comment or?
Mr. Kerr, yes, you are recognized.
Okay. Hello, good evening. I am the chair of the Civic Engagement Commission and a member of the public. So I'd like to provide an update about my whereabouts, mostly because I've not been at these meetings for the past couple of months. So basically, the community members of Lawrence, Kansas created a commission called the Civic Engagement Commission to help basically these advisory boards and city.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, your audio cut out there for about the last 10 seconds.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying is basically community members of Lawrence, Kansas created a commission called the Civic Engagement Commission to basically help advisory boards and the city commission decide on items with proper information and community engagement. And one of the items was for the Civic Engagement Commission was to investigate this board in the Lawrence Police Department and learn more about this board's role. And first off, I just want to say there's no bad blood between us. But what we investigated for 4 months was that, one, there has been major problems with accountability between Lawrence, Kansas police leadership and community members. And 2, the Community Police Review Board has not been completely focused on the community at large. More or less, this board has been focused on itself and not asking the community what they think about this board and its role. At this point in time, I feel like this board is kind of screwed, but you keep on doing it. But it's taken a very, very long time for items to get passed to the city commission or, yeah. And I know this board has been working hard on these items, but it's taking a long time, and I understand it, but the community is kind of being impatient. I'll put it that way. That's all I have. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Now, I will recognize Mr. Aravi for public comments.
Thank you, Board Member Mishra, and I apologize for interrupting. I'm new to the YouTube, which is why, or new to the thing, which is why I usually do these in person. The reason I wanted to speak tonight is that we have a complete disconnect between the citizens and the police as far as what the understanding of the OPA process should be and what it is. I've published a couple videos that outline the actions of the police on the street and the reactions of the Office of Professional Accountability. And I think that the board should have enough in those videos to start asking some questions of the Lawrence Police Department and finding out why accountability is conducted in conversations and there's no documentation. Why accountability is handled at the patrol level. Why accountability means that officers are exonerated for behavior that is blatant. We literally have officers that would threaten false charges. I walked down to the law enforcement center and stood in the parking lot of the law enforcement center during shift change. And I read the law enforcement code of ethics. For that, we were told that we were looking for anything arrestable, stalking, harassment, anything. This was Sergeant Byrne, Sergeant Mike Byrne. And he said blatantly that he was looking for anything arrestable and that the department was looking for anything arrestable. OPA, Troy Squire, I believe his exact quote was, "I'm fine with Sergeant Byrne running interference, and I'll be fine with it tomorrow."
Mr. Ravi, may I just remind you to keep the personal names out of your public comment? So
I apologize, sir, but these are individuals that actually committed these items, and if I can't bring them, their names to the commission, then what is the point? Because we need to have accountability, and it's not all the officers. There's a lot of officers out there that are doing a good job, and I can name them as well. But if we can't bring the problem officers by name to the commission and to the and publicly and talk about it, especially when it's on video, that kind of offended me. And I'm sorry, I don't mean any disrespect, but we need to be able to talk about this. And that's the problem. We're not talking about it.
So, Mr. Ravi, this is again Board Member Mishra. I don't want to get into conversation, but as board procedures enumerate, we've said rather any such comments or complaints may be provided to the board in writing, and the board will work with them. So we absolutely value your input, but rather than putting out the names publicly, if you wanted to share with us those names in a written complaint, very happy to take it. Having said that, if there is more you want to share with us, please.
I'm really not sure because after those comments, I honestly am not sure if I'm wasting my time here, sir. I guess I'm done.
So, Mr. Ravi, I would.
I'm going to continue to watch, but I'm done speaking because I don't feel like my words are appreciated. So I'll watch, but have a good night.
I'm sorry you feel that way, but
I'm not Justin Spies, guys. I could be acting like Justin Spies. Do you realize that? I could be doing that. I'm not that guy. And I'm going to turn my video back on because I want you to see my face. I am not that guy. I am very committed to seeing that we no longer have police officers assaulting people on our streets. These aren't people I know. I've never met these people. I've talked to one of them. I'm sorry, but this is a very sensitive issue with me because of what I've witnessed and what I've personally experienced and what I've personally experienced from the police department for calling it out. And by God, we've got to have some kind of change around here. And if OPA isn't going to do it, then we need to rely on you or the city commission to do it. And I'm sorry for being so direct and so emotional about this, but this hit a spot for me. I have filmed so much crap that's gone on in this town in the last couple of years, and I feel like I'm being ignored. I am not Justin Spies. I will not stop. I've incorporated what I do. It's registered with the state. It's not going away. I'm consulting lawyers. I'm going to sue this town if we don't stop this. I'm not wanting to sue this town. I've repeatedly said I don't want to do that. But I will sue this town if there's nobody that's going to step up and change this. I will continue to watch, sir. Thank you for listening, and I apologize for being a little emotional.
No, Mr. Ravi, that's absolutely, and I think I speak on behalf of the board in that we value public comment and interaction, and we want to make sure that this is a fair and equitable process so that if you believe about your complaint, then may I request that you submit it in writing so that we can then discuss it further. Thank you, Mr. Ira. Then Brandon, any further comments?
I believe that is all of the participants on Zoom, and we have no participants in the audience.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. So then, moving on to the agenda item D, do we work with the draft report first before we get a report from the chief of police? We don't see him. We don't see the chief here. Somebody else? Brandon? Because I thought that could happen quicker than, but we will stay with agenda item 1.
Okay.
D1.
Yes, this is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. We wanted to, since we left off on this item at the end of the last meeting and we did not get to the third item that was on the agenda in the last meeting, we went ahead and ordered those first since that's old business, and then put the new business later in the meeting. But I think those will be pretty brief reports.
Okay. Board member Littleton.
This board member, Stephanie Littleton. Sanjay, if I may, I just would like to make a comment real quick since I was not here for the meeting last month regarding former board member Jane Gibson's resignation. And I just really want to say thank you so much to her for her relentless 3.5 years of service. So I just kind of wanted to put that on the record because I did not get to put that on the record, but I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, board member Littleton. So Brandon, did we decide you want to go 1, 2, 3?
Yes.
So our discussion now is about the CPRB work group draft, charter draft. Who wants to open the discussion? Okay, I recognize board member Littleton, and then I'll come to board member Santos.
Okay, this board member, Stephanie Littleton. If we may, I just would like to go back to the section number 3 under project expectations and scope of work. Once again, since I wasn't present to speak to it, but just one little thing that I would like to, for a minor little bit of a discussion under number 6, where it says assess and make recommendations regarding the CPRB's role. I prefer that it say something to the effect of and or, and not necessarily kind of put us in a box where we have to pick one of these roles. If that's possible. I know that I watched the video that you all had changed this from the last call and took off some of that sentence. But I'm just suggesting us not limit to one of these roles. I feel pretty strongly, my own perception or perspective anyway, I guess, is that there are 3 distinctions that are going to be really important for us to consider, but obviously the stakeholder group will make that decision. But one is to review police policies and practices, to provide advice to the police department, city manager, and the city commission, and to exercise our oversight of police community relations and then some. So with that being said, if anybody is not opposed, just leaving that more open so we could have a choice of 1, 2, or 3 versus just 1.
So this is board member Mishra. So board member Littleton, which aspect? So this number 6 is what we are looking at?
Yes.
And you wanted to add language to it?
Yeah, I mean, if it's and or I think Marie's got an idea here, so I'm open to suggestion.
Marie Taylor, board member, so technically or is not exclusive, so it doesn't exclude that either any of those could come into play, but I understand the concern. So I think you're just saying, board member Littleton, just write the word A&D/OR, right? So there's no doubt that it could be some combination of any of those.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. That's what I think. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Just so, other stakeholders, when they look at it, this board member Littleton, they don't think it's that we're looking to pick one of these.
So quick clarification, this is board member Mishra, a clarification question for Brendan. At this point, if for these edits, we are not seeking motions.
That's correct. I don't believe motions are needed unless you're sensing split opinions about these sorts of things, but I don't think we have to be that, that formal about it.
Thank you. Thank you. So then we can edit it and add an and also. Is that reasonable? Thank you, board member Littleton. So now may I recognize board member Santos, please?
Yes, I just note that I agree with the proposed change, as I think others have signaled their agreement. So, but, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in our late night meeting the last month that we left off talking about the number and voting capacity of members of the community appointed by the city commission. And I wanted to go back further than that and ask if someone knows how we got to the point that 2 things occurred. One, I never heard in the city commission's comments that they expected the board to come back to them with this formality of, oh, would you approve what we came up with? I thought that they had said work with the groups, come up with something, and that is the way we'd like you to proceed. Secondly, the idea of, I'm not sure where it came from, but the commission has already appointed the members of this board. To ask them to appoint 5 more people in the capacity of community representatives seems to be at best redundant. My recollection of what the consultant said was the board and the police department, in its capacity of trying to find out how best to proceed with the future authority of the board, should reach out to the community, but not necessarily to say, oh yes, we're appointing these people and they have the appointment power of the city commission. All of those steps will lead to more bureaucracy, more delay, and more opportunity to slow down what we're trying to achieve here. Why did the work group think it was important to have the city commission formally select and appoint members to this work group when the board itself has the authority to ask members of the community to provide their input without authorizing them, or if they wanted to authorize them to have a vote on the group? So my first question is, can we not avoid some of the bureaucracy of trying to bring another layer of bureaucracy into the work group when we're trying to move forward as quickly as possible by, one, taking the additional time to ask the commission members to appoint someone and then to acknowledge that formally in some fashion? Why not eliminate that from this document and simply say that the board work group is going to engage 5 members of the community and allow them to participate at whatever level there is? I just don't see any purpose in adding another layer of formality. And that formality, in my opinion, is going to trigger legal requirements under the open meetings laws. So if anyone knows, and I'm sure there is someone that knows, how we got from this idea of a consultant saying, oh, you should work at trying to create a group that can do this work, to saying, let's go back to the commission and have the commission select people and go through that additional bureaucratic process.
I saw Board Member Taylor. Board Member Taylor, you're recognized.
Board Member Marie Taylor. So this is what the City Commission, in my recollection, is what they wanted. They actually want this, what you're calling bureaucracy, but they also want to have this formalized process of having community members, not the board, be involved. And it came from the Citygate report. That's how it was written. But I think that this is the way that it would actually be implemented. I don't think there's any other way to do it but through an appointment process, through this task force. So that's how I read the Citygate, and that's my reading of the sentiment that the commission offered when this was presented to them, our situation was presented to them. That's my recollection.
Board Member Santos, you're recognized.
Board Member Santos, my review and look at that meeting, and I've looked at it several times, is that the commission never acted as a body. It never said, oh, this is the commission's direction. There were members of the commission who said, oh, here's how I see it. And other people said, here's how I see it. If we rely upon the individualized comments of members of the commission, we could probably find some support for almost any procedure. But what I do not understand why we think it's necessary to be so formal about taking that step of going back to the board, or, I mean, to the commission, or why are we even taking this document back to the commission? You know, why not say the board and the police department and the work group that was proposed and recommended by the consultant have chosen to do it this way. And then after that work is done, take that to the commission.
Okay, anybody else? Brandon, you have an opinion?
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, I'd defer to Tanya and Stephanie to weigh in if they'd like to right now. Otherwise, I can provide some thoughts.
This is board member Stephanie Littleton. I want to say I recall, as what Marie said, that they were wanting a more formal process, you know, the city commission does, but I'm not sure that that's all accurate. You know, it really kind of seems to have gotten washed up in this process. Maybe the expectation that this is what we should do. And I really like, Michael, what you're proposing. I don't know if this is, if it's truly an expectation by the city commission. But what I do know, and what I like, what I'm hearing from you, Michael, is that we need to move this forward. And we need to do it now. We needed it 6 months ago. And I think time is of the essence. If we could flip that quickly, I would be okay with it, but I'm not sure that that's the case. And is that going to put us back again when we go to the city commission and then say, okay, we don't like this? So I'm open to what obviously Brandon and the city is going to allow, right? But I like what you're saying because we just need to move on. We need to move this forward.
Board Member Salvini, yes.
Board Member Salvini, thank you. I am in agreement with Board Member Santos and Stephanie. I do have a question, Brandon, for you, and I'm wondering about, and I'm thinking about the language, and I don't have the report right in front of me, but it was referred to as a work group, correct? From the City Gate report?
Yes, working group.
Right, and so in terms of a working group, that's different than a task force. And again, I don't know what the formalities are with the city, but it seems as if a work group is an ad hoc group that comes together and works on a project, and developing a project, and when they're done with it, the sustainability of the work of that is defined within their work, correct? And so it wouldn't, so to me, calling it a work group as opposed to a task force, and I'm just, again, just talking about this right now, makes it less formal. And then I'm wondering about what that means in terms of the formality of the open meeting laws.
Board Member Santos.
Two quick things. I don't remember the name of the person who spoke in the public comments of this meeting, but I do remember their last comment was from, in whatever capacity he is speaking about the community, that the community is becoming impatient. As best I can tell, if we try to move this through the formality of the city commission participating in some sort of appointment and acknowledgement of where the board is at on this work group task force, it will be at a minimum 3 more months. And that is just, you know, another enormous impediment to having confidence that the board is actually moving forward. You know, I just don't see that another 3 months And going through that formality is going to achieve some value that would offset the delay in trying to move forward quickly. And I would again tell you, if you ask the city commission, the elected officials in this city, to participate, you are engaging in legal issues concerning the open meetings laws. So, but again, I'm just saying my point of view from the very beginning with this document has been try to move it forward as quickly as possible so we can do work and not talk about the finer points of how we're going to do it.
Can I go, Board Member Littleton.
Sure, this Board Member Littleton. I'm just going to piggyback for a second on what Michael's saying. I think it's important to, and not commenting directly to the public comment today, but the points made by both, well put, that the sense of urgency of where we need to get to is there. You know, about the accountability, how the process with the complaints is being handled, which we've not really ever known because we've not been disclosed, but putting all that forward, we just have a sense of urgency to get there and get this done.
So this is Board Member Mishra, and my comments are more in line with what Board Member Taylor said. And granted, this will slow the process down, but if I look at the IAP2 public participation spectrum, that's one thing we were, use a word, we were faulted on, criticized on, or we were said we didn't do it right enough, is we tried to do, I think we did involve. This gets to the collaborate part of it. It still doesn't get to the empower part of it, but at least gets to the collaborate part of it. So we have maybe 3 months late, but we will have a solution that will be accepted by more of the people if the process works like it's supposed to. Board Member
Board Member Marie Taylor, I totally agree with you, Vice Chair, because I feel as if we had gone back and revisited with the board, even a progress, to the commission with a progress report on where we were 6 months earlier, it would not have kept us going on the path that we were going, that they later on, in my opinion, they disapproved of. And I don't think they were satisfied with our activities in terms of getting community support. I thought we did a great job, but the kinds of comments that we received, I think they wanted to take a different approach with. And so I think that in this instance, we may think we're saving time, but if we pick the wrong solution and we pick who we think should be the community members who should participate, who are not us, and not give them a hand in that selection process, that it could come back and slow us down even further. That is my worry, is that we would actually be in trying to save time, that we'd actually disrupt our own and disrupt our own plans. I think they do want to be more involved, and they do treat us as and see us as an advisory board in this instance.
Board Member Santos.
Yes, I can see that there is value in trying to get some formality into the selection of these members of the community and the representation as deeply into the community as we can. But since I've been on the board, the biggest complaint of this board and really the biggest complaint about the consultant even having input into where the board is at was, look, we did all this work and now you're stepping in here and creating a situation where we have to stop doing this. And as someone said so elegantly, making us start over again. Every member of the community that I've heard speak are talking about it's been years. What have you done? What is it? And I don't know, because I would remind everyone, there is no direction from the commission, the elected officials, unless they act as a group. Having comments from individual members is not formal direction in any fashion. And so you can take that, but you're just taking what a person said. They cannot act as individuals, they can only act as a commission. And I guess my last comment on it is, I'm just a member of this group, but my priority is moving the work of the board forward so that, as someone said tonight, we're not continuing to work through all of these bureaucratic processes, and that we feel like we are doing the work of the board that was appointed. So that's really my last comment on it.
This is board member. Okay, come to you, board member Taylor.
Board member Marie Taylor, I just want to make it clear that I feel the same way in terms of frustration, in terms of feeling like this is a bureaucratic process, but at the same time, I think I have to be realistic about what has happened in the past, and that I'm not pleased with what happened with Citygate, but we have to move forward with the direction that at least I feel that we have. It may not be through a formal vote of the commission, but I think we had enough voices of concern about the direction that we had taken, and we are an advisory board, so I do feel like we still have to follow whatever kind of adjustments they've made to the charge that was given to us back in 2020.
Thank you, board member Taylor. Any other thoughts?
Vice Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. Yeah, thank you. Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. One option maybe the board members might want to consider is, if this, so the intent of this proposal, or the intent is to take this proposal once the Police Review Board finally blesses it to the City Commission, and to make sure that they have a chance to provide their feedback about the proposal, so that when this work group is finally formed, everybody's completely on the same page, or as much as possible, about how it's, about expectations, how the work's going to be conducted, et cetera. And so one thing you might consider is presenting an option on this. One would be to not appoint the 5 community members, and and a second option would be to appoint the 5 community members, and we can give them some talking points about the pros and cons of each approach. And so that may be an option, so that we don't, you don't have to make a decision tonight and try to read the minds of the commissioners in a couple of weeks when this is presented to them, but instead you can engage them in that conversation.
Brandon, and thinking aloud, I was also going to say that extra option or request maybe, because I think if you hear the board, one of the things is speed of action is becoming an issue here. Right. And if they want to appoint 5 members, if you can set a fast track appointment of 5 members, instead of 3 months, if it is a week, that's 5-6 weeks saved, and we got buy-in from the community, so that may help. And I'm sure the City Commission also wants to move on and work get done with the board. So absolutely,
good points.
Any other comments? Any thoughts? So do we need to do that? Does the working group have a sense of what the board wants to suggest there? Yes, no, Brandon? Yes, Board Member Santos.
From my point of view, I'm perfectly satisfied if the board is comfortable with Brandon presenting some sort of options that can be somehow inserted into the document so the commission sees that there might be a couple of ways to proceed, if that's okay with the rest of the board.
So we could present it could be presented this way, just as option one and then an alternative of not selecting the 5 community members.
Board Member Santos.
The only thing, Brandon, that I think might be more appropriate is it's not a choice of whether there should be 5 community members. The choice is whether or not you want to go through the formality and bureaucracy of the commission participating in that process and formalizing it, or does the commission simply want the board, as I thought they said, to make sure you get the correct level of participation for members of the community. I mean, the board has the ability to select and identify those people as well as the commission does. So I'm just saying, not that that your language is to not appoint community members, but how you should, what process you should use in doing so.
Understood.
So if I may try to edit it, what I heard Board Member Santos say, yes, the CPRB could select 5 community members. Because if I was getting a little antsy, this is Board Member Mishra, sorry, that if we took those 5 community members out, then the strength of the group becomes 7. And even now it's an even numbered group. So I don't know about that, but yes, at least that keeps the body to a reasonable size.
So does this language in green, does that look acceptable?
So may I, this is Board Member Mishra, I know this language is acceptable, but if it comes back to us to do this, how will we execute? Yeah, go ahead. Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos. Well, first of all, I have some sense, even though I don't know everyone personally on the board, that each of the board members has some contact with, relationship with, history with those groups that we have identified as being either underrepresented or not having a voice to the extent that others might, and that the board itself is capable, as the commission, in identifying those people. And then secondly, that the city's community newsletter could, for the benefit of the board, identify that we're interested in seeing if there's anyone out that is particularly interested. But I think there's a fairly quick way of doing it.
Thank you, Board Member Santos. Thank you. My only, again, Board Member Mishra, my only comment on this is, if you view the commission as the community and we bring them to participate and empower, I'm using the same guidelines, IAP 2 guidelines of participation, then we need to give them, I know they have done it by putting us on the board, but this is the second level that you give them an opportunity to participate once again into the working of the development of the work. Yes, Board Member Minor, I saw your hand up.
Yes, this is Board Member Minor. I'm struggling to understand where we're at in regards to the comments that's been going on. Is the focus on selecting 5 more members, or is it to focus on selecting when we should select those 5 members? Because it sounds like we're on the fence about certain areas here, and we're talking about the different community people that we may want to bring on here and things of that nature. At the same time, I'm hearing that we're questioning the city commission's influence in regards to selecting those people. Help me better understand where we're at on this topic.
Go, Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, I just want to be clear. I don't have and didn't intend any comment that I've ever made to suggest that the city commission's influence or how they see any additional participation by other members of the community is the concern. I am only focused on the temporal issues associated with this process, and that I told the chief I'm going to be alive when this thing gets done. You know, I don't want to have this thing going into 2023 and we're still fighting our way through bureaucracy. And it is a fact if you have to take it to the commission. I'm just saying taking it to the commission is a bureaucratic 3-month process to get to the point where you're going to get someone where you can say, here's our new 5 people. So I don't have any concern about how they might influence picking another 5. I'd be perfectly okay with that.
Board Member Littleton.
This is Board Member Littleton. James, what we're really trying to just do is look at like what Brandon has written in there is just an alternative to move the process along. Would that be a better choice versus going through the formality of what the city commission would do? We're not opposed to the city commission selecting. It's just a matter of how fast can we move through the process.
And this Board Member, go ahead, Board Member Minor.
Yeah, this is Board Member Minor. Yeah, that makes it clear if we want to, whatever options we have. And the key thing is that as a group, if we go down that path, we hold to it. But we also should, when we're going in front of the city commission, have a good reason for why we went down that path. And I think that would help from my experience, that would help with the city commission is if we're very definitive and solid in our recommendation as to the 5 community members and how we want to choose it, or we want the city commission to choose them, or vice versa. But if we have a strict uniform decision, I think that would make the process go a lot smoother.
Board Member Littleton.
This Board Member Littleton, I completely agree, James. I think whomever would be presenting from our board as we brought this to the city commission, it'd be a great opportunity to convey, we're not opposed to you, but here's what we're proposing, or how, is it possible, can you move this faster? And that's really what it's all about.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, would it be possible to vote on this proposed change to their charter? And the reason why is because I think that unless we're going to propose exactly how we think we would go about having a fair process for selecting the members from diverse communities, and we can present that along with this as one of a viable option. I don't think we're going to save any time because we'll have to then figure out the logistics of how we do that and then do the vote. And I think it'll take us 3 meetings. And so I don't think we can avoid the bureaucracy of the process because here we are. The whole thing's been bureaucratic. And so I think if we leave it in the hands of the commission to use the processes they already have in place for how they go about selecting people to serve on various task force or advisory boards, they have a process in place. They'll put it on their agendas, and I think it will happen a lot faster than us trying to then devise a process ourselves. That I think that they are going to overrule us on it anyway. I think they would want to have a say in who are the extra people who now get a seat at the table. So I would like to vote if that's possible, Brandon.
Board Member Littleton first, and then Board Member Santos, and then Board Member Minor.
Board Member Littleton. I guess my hand goes up faster, huh?
I need to use my hand.
And I get what Marie's saying. I mean, I think ultimately we all want to get to the same place and move it as fast as we can. And maybe that's true. We really can't get past this formality. Maybe ultimately we need to not make this such a big issue, necessarily have to do a vote, and just make sure that whoever presents this, that we convey, the sense of urgency. I mean, ask that we get if we can get some kind of a timeline to move that along. Because I do think that as I kind of take a step back and think about it, I don't know that I want to necessarily be I want it more neutral, I guess is what I want to say, for these appointments than from our board. And that's where I would feel more comfortable of being neutral to that selection.
Thank you, Board Member Littleton. Board Member Santos, and then Board Member Minor and Board Member Salvi.
I'm not opposed to a vote, but if there is going to be a vote, I would propose a motion that is not tied to Brandon's highlighted changes, but more clearly to the ability to avoid the bureaucracy of the process. And, but I don't disagree if there's some way to avoid it, that we could come up with some language that makes it clear, what we're trying to do is to avoid having another 3 months of procedures. I mean, we can ask Brandon, but I don't know what the commission's agenda is in the next 3 months, but I'm fairly certain that whatever it is a situation where the ability to get in, have a vote. If the vote is for the commission to do those appointments, take the time for the commission to have a thoughtful ability to do that. Get those people on board to the work group. It will surely be fall of this year.
Okay. Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. I am for the City Commission choosing the 5 members. For this reason, they may be looking at it from a perspective of demographics. Other things that we don't hear, I have not heard, maybe from this board, in regards to certain criteria. Maybe we should recommend that we work in conjunction with the City Commission and put a timeline. Instead of 3 months, we say in 2 months. Of those types of requirements to move the board along, instead of saying it's going to be 3 months, maybe 4 months, we establish a time frame that we want to have those 5 members on the board.
So before I come to you, Tanya, my comment to Board Member Minor's statement agreed, but the group that ultimately should decide how quickly we should execute this is who? The City Commission. So if they think this should take 6 months, let it take 6 months. If they think it should take a week, they will make a decision within a week. This is their task. We are an advisory body. So I would defer to them. And they are elected bodies. I would defer to them to make the best decision for the community. Come to you, Board Member Salvini, and then Board Member Santos.
This is Board Member Salvini. Thank you, colleagues. I've listened very carefully to what you've been saying, and I am firm in being comfortable in having the City Commission make the decision. They have the protocols in place, et cetera. And so I'm apt, just to let you know, to move in that direction and not look at option A. I do believe in reading it and thinking about it with good intent to expedite. A whole set of unintended circumstances would occur that I agree with Board Member Taylor would extend the length of time and cause some stress. Thank you.
Board Member Santos.
Yes, well, having heard my fellow board members' comments, you know, I don't think there's a need for a motion unless someone else does. I'm perfectly happy with the language that's currently in there, if that's the general consensus of the board. But I'd point out, in 40 years of being a city attorney, anyone that believes that the political process of an elected commission can be expedited because they say they want to is pure fantasy. I mean, they don't have the ability to move forward quickly if they put all of their minds to it. It's just not the nature of the elected political process. But, you know, I have no problem if you guys want to do it that way.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor. I just want to also bring another point into discussion on this, is that if we recall why Citygate wanted others who were not us and not the police department and not the police officers association to be involved. And so I take that to mean that we would not want to create a perception that we were somehow stacking the deck, like, you know, in ways against the others who we're trying to have a collaborative process with. And so for that reason alone, perception, it allows us to be more neutral in being part of this membership, that we didn't actually choose the other members in the group. So I think that from the political wise within the group itself, if we have a process where they're basically outsiders who have a vested interest as well, who have not been sitting on this board, but are also community members who have perhaps talked, like Board Member Minor mentioned, who have other who could bring other perspectives into the discussion that we haven't had present. Those are all benefits to this group, and so actually it would give it more legitimacy for it to be processed through the commission. So that's why I don't think that the board should be the one selecting the members. And I understand that causes strain and it lengthens time that this is involved, but I think legitimacy and everyone feeling like that there's a possibility of a good outcome that's balanced will help us in the long run. Seeing what's happened over the past 2 years, which has been frustrating, but that's my take.
Board Member Littleton.
This Board Member Littleton, I have a question for Brandon regarding this. Would it be reasonable, or is it just that we just have to let it flow as it's going to go? Would it be reasonable to put some kind of a timeline in there. I think that's what we're asking for, is just to move that along for the 5-member being selected. But that's all I would ask is, if not, then maybe we just have to live through that and convey that to them, that that's what we'd like.
Yes. Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, I've been thinking about the same thing too, Stephanie. And my thought is, there is this section 10 project milestones, which tries to provide just kind of a high level overview of what we'd see as the calendar. Task force convenes. We might be able to communicate about that in this section, or it may be worth putting a statement back in the other section. Sorry, I'm scrolling around like crazy here. But just to point out to the commission, upon the commission's vote of approval of this project charter or this proposal, we would want to convene, this group within 1 month or 2 months, whatever sounds like a reasonable timeline. Of course, we'll still need to get a facilitator under contract, which shouldn't take too terribly long. But I think probably about a one month timeline to get the community members appointed, get a facilitator under contract, and line schedules up. It seems like a reasonable timeline to accomplish all that.
Sorry. Go, Brandon.
Just to add one more thought, is that we'll be doing all of this over the summer. And so, that may, I know everybody's got family commitments and travel schedules probably all lined up for the summer. So that may throw a little bit of a wrench, just depending on some of those variables for each individual.
Thank you, Brandon. Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. Yes, I think that's what everyone has stated is good comments. But I think that, and along with that, I think that as long as we put something in front of the City Commission that says, and give them an expectation from our point of view, because it sounds like we're being put under the light of a sense of urgency in order to get other things done, then we will be able to say, if the City Commission wants to make these choices, here's the timeline that we need to have. But at the same time, we show that we're moving forward with other actions while these board members are being selected, so that we don't fall so far behind. And I think that we could pick out some of those actions where it doesn't really need to have to have the additional 5 members to go along there, or it'll be easier to go back and do some tweaking on that. But I think it is within our fairness to give them a timeline. Because we don't want to, make a recommendation and then they say, no, we don't like that, like I've been hearing in this meeting. This way we put our viewpoint and we get their viewpoint and we move along.
Thank you. My take, Board Member Mishra. So 2 things. First, am I hearing enough agreement that A should go away? Raise of hands or yes, no, anything? Good. Okay, so A should go away, Brandon. We are back to the original. And now to the original. I want to give the commission its whatever. And as I said, I'm repeating myself. If they think this is an important thing to do, they will act quickly. If they think this is not on their burner issue, then our role is advisory. I keep coming back to it. We have said we can work, and we have shown that we can work fast, but I believe it. I would not put any sentence to say, do it quick. Board Member Santos.
I would also point out, though, when you say that we are an advisory board, that does not preclude this group from saying to the elected officials, expediency has been identified in the public as a significant issue, and that failure to be expedient, that is, for years, people are saying, what do you guys do? You do nothing, you know, and what are you going to do? And when are you going to do it? Being an advisory board does not mean not telling them what we think they should do.
Any other thoughts? Any other areas for comment or discussion?
Are we?
Yeah, go. Board Member Santos.
Are you talking about the document itself, Sanjay?
Yes. Now we wanted to move on. So,
okay.
Any other discussion on this before we move on? No. So go, Board Member Santos.
I have a comment, and maybe Brandon or someone else knows where it would fit, but I am of the opinion that in the process of this work group, task force, whatever it's being called, that there be identified an opportunity for every member of the police department, whatever their particular schedule is, that they be afforded the opportunity to at least speak to the board. I mean, these are the people that this board oversees from the standpoint of if there's an issue. You know, of all the people in the city that deserve an opportunity to be heard if they have thoughts, there should be something in this document identifying that the community members that serve as members of the police will be given an opportunity on at least 2 dates, so because some of them work nights, to be able to be heard what they think about the board's efforts to try to be as effective in the community as possible. So I didn't see that in here, but I would recommend that there be something like that.
A discussion, I agree with that suggestion that given that they are the critical component of this execution, we should afford them the opportunity to come and just like we are doing for everybody in the community, but they can do it as a community member. Here you are trying to parcel them out as a group. So yeah, Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, I think that's an item for the task force in terms of like how they decide to structure the input. So I don't know if we want to dictate how that granular for the task force, or do we feel like that's covered within their charge? That activity could happen under their charge.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, that's exactly my point. You know, I don't want the work group or board to have the ability to ignore that. I want them to see that in the work group document that it was pointed out to them that these members of the police department should be entitled to an opportunity to be heard. And that will probably go as far as any action to make sure that it seems like a credible effort. So the idea that there might be the opportunity or the granularity in the process, in my opinion, is unacceptable.
So, okay, this is Board Member Mishra, where I think, Michael, you are suggesting an edit is on page 5, public engagement, second paragraph, first And at this point, what they have said is direct stakeholders, and they put police leadership, Lawrence Association, but then we can add members of the community and the police force.
Correct.
If that is, yes. Brandon, you see where the edit can go?
Assistant City
And so
Manager
after
Brandon
this, just before the period here, after
So
the
you-
bracket, no, I will leave that. After that bracket, I would say, and the community and the Lawrence Police Force. Community members, Lawrence community members, and the Lawrence Police Force.
Gotcha.
Explicitly. So would that be reasonable, Board Member Santos?
Yes, I think that's a great place to put it. And short enough that it's not emphasizing anything other than participation. Or the
And members of
opportunity.
the Lawrence Police Force, yeah. How do the others feel about that? Go ahead, Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. I agree with that. What is written in green here on that statement.
This is
Any other comments? Yeah, Brandon, you wanted to say something?
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. I might suggest a variation of this that would read with input from Lawrence community members and members of the Lawrence Police Department, because this sentence is trying to describe the collaboration among the work group and the stakeholders in the work group. And I think what Board Member Santos is talking about is gaining additional input for that collaboration, as opposed to inviting every community member or every member of the Lawrence Police Department to sit at the table with the work group and collaborate with them.
So Brandon, this is Board Member Mishra. I look at it, I go back to IEP,
Yes.
the draft that you have, and take a look at collaborate.
Collaboration under IAP is an extremely high bar.
That's what we are striving for, because I thought we did consultant involved earlier.
So the proposal calls for more of, in terms of public participation, a consultation process or an involved process. What we're talking about with the work group itself is a collaborative process with those direct stakeholders that are listed above.
Yeah. I look at this, Board Member Mishra, I look at the stakeholders as the community members and the police force, not the officers, not the association officers or the leaders. And that's why I am back to what Michael said, is we need to explicitly say that these people should be part of the process. Board Member Santos, and then come to Board Member Littleton.
Yes, Board Member Santos, I absolutely agree with Sanjay, that whether any of them care to speak or want to be heard, the most important thing in my mind is, as members of the community, that they have this opportunity, that the chief says to them, guess what, guys? You're going to have an opportunity on 2 occasions to let this work group have some idea of what you think. No differently than if there is a person out there unrelated to the PD that they're members of the community, let's hear what they have to say, or at least give them the chance.
Board Member Littleton.
This board member, Stephanie Littleton. So I understand that this document, this charter is for a collaboration process. I also understand what Sanjay, you and Michael are wanting, and I think that is definitely something that we want to consider and should be considered for their input and who would like to give input. But I don't know that it's necessarily for this document in the place where we're looking at. I think it's down or up from where Brandon is right now, where he was typing in. But I go back to what Marie brought up as far as giving it the charge towards the task force to talk about, because part of that task force is going to be, where are we getting all the input? And I think that getting their input is definitely important. I think it's a great point. I don't know that it goes in this document though. At least not in this space. Because once again, we're trying to do a collaborative, can't bring everybody in.
Board Member Tate. Oh, sorry, Stephanie.
Nope, you're fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Murray Taylor, I think that Brandon's proposed edit to say input does not exclude them from the task force from deciding to take a more comprehensive take on that kind of level of involvement. And so what my concern is that we, just being the board, don't get too far ahead of what we think the task force should be doing, because the whole point of having the task force is to bring all these other voices who then kind of drive the process as well, which is what we were accused of being, of not bringing in enough voices. So if we dictate to specifically what we think the public engagement process should be, or the outcomes or anything like that, and we don't have the language be more open in terms of what they could possibly decide, then again, it looks like we're driving the process even as we form this task force, like our fingerprints are all over it. So that's why I think if we say, input from the Lawrence community members and members of the police department, it doesn't exclude that effort. But again, it's because if we start to dictate too much about what the task force can do, then we might as well just not have the task force, and they'll say that you've basically designed the outcome that you want. That's my concern. So anything that keeps us more open and allows for thoughts or perspectives that we haven't even thought about would be good. Then I won't feel so bad that we're taking so long, because then we don't know, we haven't shut off possibilities of different outcomes.
Santos.
Yes. Again, I don't have any issue with how it's written or the additional language, as long as it's identified that when we're talking about the Lawrence community members, that we want it to be known that the very people who are the subject of all of this are also part of the membership. And that is not presupposing what the work of this group is. It's simply saying, as we said about Lawrence community members, that the members include the Lawrence Police Department. And I think that goes a long way to making sure that it doesn't appear that somehow they're just an entity that is subject to whatever the board or commission comes up with from the standpoint of, we don't care. We do care. They're members, and that's all I care about. The language looks good to me either way, as long as that members of the Lawrence PD are in there.
So this board member Mishra, I see a sense that Brandon, your edit with input will work. Any comments? Any other comments on the document before we pass it on? Are we ready to then say this is good?
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire. I just want to go back and just make sure, was there agreement under Section 5, Task Force membership, to keep this additional language, or in my mind, it wasn't completely resolved before we moved on. So we're good with the language.
We are back to that. Do we want to give a direction or advice to the commission?
I thought that, this is Board Member Santos, I thought that the general consensus was that was not necessary.
Yeah. That was my feeling, that these are responsible people. They will make the best decision for us.
All right.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions you have, Brandon, for us?
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, not a question. Well, it may be if you want to discuss it, but we did, the drafting committee, we kind of struggled with, should we use the language of task force or the language of work group? And I think especially Board Member Salvini's comments landed with me that work group would probably be better terminology. So I will, if it's okay, I'll go back after this meeting and just do a probably find replace to swap out those terms.
Thank you, Brandon. Board members, this is Board Member Mishra. Any other comments, edits? And in the edited form, are we ready to approve it? Can somebody make a motion? Yes, Board Member Minor.
I hate to go back, though. We talked about, we removed a statement regarding a timeline that our expectation on the city commission. And from what I heard, the other members think that we want to let them set the stage for that, how long they want to work with that. Yeah. The problem I have with that is we still are under pressure to get things done. It would be very problematic if we're saying we still don't have the people from the city commission yet, or things like that. I think it's within our right to say, if we want to have five additional members, we will need them by this particular time frame. I think that's just, I would hate to have that back and forth conversation with the city commission on when we're going to get these people if we don't give some input on when we need to have them, if we need to have them. But if it's decided by the group that we want to let them set the timeline for that, that's fine with me. But I just think we could be running into some trouble if we don't at least give our recommendation on how soon those 5 members need to be working with us.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, perhaps we don't need to put that explicitly in the document, but when it's presented, that could be stressed and provide, and perhaps the presenter could provide the ideal time frame.
Is that a reasonable request, Brandon?
But I was going to offer the exact same thought. So yes, yeah, I think when this is presented to the commission, part of the message will be time is of the essence. We need to get moving on this as soon as possible. So, and I do believe the commission will be very responsive to that. Obviously, they've been paying attention to the work of the board, and I think the drafting of this proposal. And to be honest, it would surprise me if some of them haven't already started thinking about who they might appoint if the recommendation is to do so.
Thank you, Brandon. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Anybody?
Any other questions you guys would have?
I don't want to shut off discussion, but then I would request a motion to move this on. Yes, Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Murray Taylor, do we have to take public comment, call for public comment on this at all?
Yes, that is generally how we would proceed is after the board's discussion, take public comment, and then discussion would return back to the board for any additional feedback or a motion.
So be the guide, Brandon. What's next?
Public comment would be next, and I'm not.
Alex is there. Alex is coming off video. Yeah. So do I request public comment?
Yes. Yes, that would be appropriate to do at this point.
And I should read the thing again?
No, there's no need to read it again. Yes, Alex, if you would like, if you have a comment, now would be a good time to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for recognizing me. I'm going to continue to say this, and I would like to thank all the board members who understand that the community is very impatient about this, and this needs to go. It needs to hurry up, because I know we've been on this for how long? Almost 2 years. And I think that this motion should be approved. I'll say that. Simply approve this motion. Do anything. Let's just get this done. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is Mr. Iravi there? Hearing nothing. Brandon?
And we have no additional public comment from the gallery. So
thank you.
So yes, I think unless there's further discussion among the board members, I think a motion would be appropriate at this point.
Okay. May I request a motion? Board Member Santos?
Board Member Santos, I'd move to approve the draft document as edited, as directed by the board, and so effectively done and accomplished by Brandon.
I have a second. I need a second. Thank you, Board Member Littleton. The motion. So, Brandon, you got the wording of the motion, right?
Yes, I've worded the motion to approve the draft work group proposal as edited by the board.
Thank you. Is that reasonable, Board Member Santos?
Board Member Santos, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And so we have a motion by Board Member Santos, a second by Board Member Littleton. Any discussion? So we are ready to vote then. Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. I approve.
Board Member Salvini.
Board Member Salvini, I approve.
Board Member Littleton.
Board Member Littleton, approve.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, aye.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Murray Taylor, aye.
Board Member Mishra, aye. 6-0. The motion passes. Thank you, everybody. The next item on the agenda is policies and training related to bias-based policing, use of force, and other related topics. Who's the owner of this?
Sorry, just one moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay.
So I think that item actually leads into, this is Police Chief Rich Lockhart. I think that actually
Police Chief,
into
acknowledge you.
number 3.
Sorry, I didn't see you, so I missed acknowledging you. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir. I think item number 2 actually leads into number 3 with the individualized items. So if you would like, I can go into number 3.
Fine, good. Board Member Santos?
Board Member Santos, I would only note, and that's the chief's approach of going into 3 is fine. I did have an issue that I wanted to bring up under that general. I think this is a carryover from last month, and
Yes,
which we never got to. And I just have one comment I wanted to make, but the chief should proceed.
Thank you. Chief, the floor is yours.
Okay, are we on to number 3 or are we still on number 2? 3, okay. So you have in your packet the annual use of force report. This is something that's done annually. And one of the things that I will be starting to do is share these kinds of reports with you as the Community Police Review Board. Typically, these are just published on our website, and you all just kind of receive them the way everyone else does. So you're receiving this first. This will be something that we will continue to do, sort of like we're doing with the monthly complaint report. So I want to call attention to some of the things in this report and then give you an opportunity to ask some questions. We did make a couple of changes to our use of force policy regarding the use of force options. We were reporting an addition of deadly force other than firearm, and then also changing language to reflect injuries seen by a physician to be more encompassing of when there are injuries, to change that to any technique or physical force resulting in a visible or apparent substantial injury. So that would cover a situation where somebody had an injury, didn't want to go see a physician. Under the old policy, we wouldn't have had to have reported that. So we changed that to create more reporting and accountability when we use force. I also wanted to point out training. Proactively, each scheduled in-service training session during 2021 covered topics related to the use of force, accompanied by policy review and training and strategies to decrease the intensity of situations, reducing the need for force, increasing voluntary compliance, and sound decision-making, which includes de-escalation. We do that through training with classroom instruction and scenario-based training. And I can say, as after having completed this year's training, that same thing took place. I also want to call attention to how infrequently force is used. So we had 75,900 calls. That doesn't measure every contact, so those are just the calls. So this is still, number will still be on the high side. We used force 21 times on 14 different people. If you do the math on that, that is 0.02%. Let me just repeat that, 0.02%. That is an extremely low number of instances of use of force. The demographics, I also want to call attention to that, as it is not disproportionate to the members in our community. 8 of those 14 individuals that had force used on them were white males. 1 was a white female, 2 black males, 2 Native American males, 1 Native American female. So predominantly male, predominantly white. Additionally, the age range was from 26 years old to 50 years old. You have at the last couple of pages give you a little more information about each encounter. So I will stop there and offer an opportunity for you to ask questions.
Are there any questions for the chief? Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos. Chief, I can't tell from reading this particular document, but is there a definition of use of force? I mean, from the standpoint of when you put handcuffs on someone, or, I mean, how do the officers know when they are triggering this use of force report?
Mark, would you? Lieutenant Unruh is going to pull up the policy and give us the exact definition.
It might take me a minute.
It might take us a minute. So if we want to,
I want to ask another quick clarification question, Chief. Board Member Mishra. So I saw employee assessment of citizen condition. I had to crane my neck, but that's okay. So how is that done? Because I see alcohol in mentally unstable is most commonly used there.
Can you repeat that again?
How does the officer, so I'm looking at the UF employee assessment of CIT, I would assume is citizen condition, that column.
Oh, you're on the spreadsheet. Okay. I'm looking at the narrative. So
Sorry.
let's see. Use of force, disposition.
Of the assessment.
You're talking about the use of force, the employee assessment of the citizen's condition.
Yes.
It's an observation. It's not,
So-
it's a data point that we collect. So it's not like a clinical definition. It's not a medical diagnosis. It just provides us some additional information when we're assessing the reasonableness of the use of force.
So they feel this person is alcohol.
Yeah, you
is
can,
involved, so
you
they
can smell
put-
an odor of alcohol, or you know from your training that somebody's under the influence of narcotics. Same with mentally unstable. You know from your training that somebody is not behaving in a rational manner or they're in psychosis. But there are also several where they're unknown. There was 3 of them where they were noted that it was, or 5 of them where they were unknown. So if they don't know, they're not going to report it. It's just when it's obvious, they'll report that, because that does have a bearing on whether we're using force or not. If somebody's not in a reasonable state of mind, which when they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs in psychosis, they're not able to comprehend things or maybe process things the way a rational person would. So that helps us understand that interaction better.
I have board member Minor and board member Santos next.
Yes, when you're police chief, are you talking about in the police policy manual 300.1 and 301.1 regarding the definitions of use of force, or are you using some other document?
Police Chief Rich Lockhart. Yeah. Mr. McGuire's pulled it up, and so it's right here. So we've got several definitions. Deadly force is that which would reasonably anticipated and intended to create a substantial likelihood of causing death or very serious injury. Force is the application of physical techniques or tactics, chemical agents or weapons to another person. It's not the use of force when a person allows himself or herself to be searched, escorted, handcuffed, or restrained. So that's the definition we use when we talk about using force.
Board member Santos.
Board Member Santos. Chief, I certainly understand the language of that particular section. My question is, what do you consider it when, if you had an officer that every time they made a traffic stop, they pulled their weapon on a person, or they pulled out their taser? You know, what is that from the standpoint of giving you some insight into the possibility or likelihood of a actual discharge and use of force? Do you try to track that in some fashion? If an officer pulls his weapon and points it at the citizen, is that an issue that you try to track?
It's not something that we track. We haven't observed that to be an issue of something that we need to track, and it's really difficult to track. I've never been a part of a police department that tracks weapon pulls.
If I could follow up, Chief,
Yes.
is it not correct, though, that if you have a citizen, from a citizen standpoint, the idea of an officer being so nervous or unsure of themselves that they feel compelled every time they approach someone on a traffic stop, that they're pointing a handgun at the person, is that not important from the standpoint of understanding what's going on with your officer? Do they not have a obligation to at least tell their supervisor, look, I feel comfortable, I don't feel comfortable without pulling my weapon?
Again, that's a hypothetical situation. It's not anything that we've observed here. I don't know that we have anyone in our department that would fit into that category, so I can't really speak intelligently to it. I can say that our officers in the course of their duties, if they were struggling, they would most likely be reflected in their performance, and that we would note that and take whatever corrective actions we would need to take.
And finally, Chief, if you're comfortable doing this, I am confident that there is a vast amount of data out there on a relationship to the number of times an officer pulls their weapon and the issues related to the community complaining about it. You know, that if you just counted how many of your community complaints were, well, he pulled his weapon on me unnecessarily, you know, can you look into that?
This is Police Chief Rich Lockhart. I'm not aware of us ever receiving such a complaint, so it would be difficult to look into. I can tell you from my experience in Kansas City, officers pull weapons and point weapons more than they did when I was in Warrensburg. So a lot of it's the nature of the community. We aren't pulling weapons nearly as much here in Lawrence as you would in a larger city because we don't have those situations. So officers are only pulling weapons when they're in a situation where they would be faced with potentially using deadly force. So the idea that we would pull weapons on a traffic stop unnecessarily, I think is really unfounded. And I don't think you would see any of that happening here.
Chief, I would disagree with you. I've seen many instances in many police departments where particularly inexperienced officers, because they haven't gained confidence in their tactical experience, unnecessarily do that, and the citizens complain about it. I mean, it's not an unusual thing. And again, I'd ask if you could check into it.
Yeah, Police Chief Rich Lockhart, I've not seen that. I've been a police officer for 32 years, and the officers go through here 16 weeks of field training. We emphasize in that training the proper use of firearms, the proper use of force, and we would see something like that, I believe, during that 16 weeks. Once they're completed with that training, they're well prepared to be able to go out on the streets and use that firearm properly. We've not had any complaints. If we had, we would certainly look into those and look at that officer's performance to see if that was something that was indicative of a problem.
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Ware. I just want to make sure the board members understand, Chief. So when you say 16 weeks, is that the patrol training officer period?
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about that program?
Yeah, so Chief Rich Lockhart again. So the officers go through, right now, they go through a 14-week training period in the academy. And during that time frame, they learn when it's appropriate to pull a firearm and when it's not. We get them back here after that, and we do 16 weeks of field training where they're with an experienced officer and they're actually handling calls, doing traffic stops. Those points are again emphasized. Those officers are evaluated daily, and if they have performance issues like inappropriate uses of force, then those are addressed during the training. If those things aren't able to be overcome, then we would not keep them as employees. So in Kansas City, it was frequent that we would have officers in a situation like what you're describing, Mr. Santos, and they would not be retained as employees. We don't have anyone here that has an issue with inappropriate uses of force, especially involving the firearm. We've not received any complaints like that. So it's a situation where we're speaking about a hypothetical, and while there may be data somewhere else, I've not seen data to that regard, but we don't have that as an issue here that within the Lawrence Police Department.
And Assistant City Manager Brandon, just one more question for the chief. You want to talk about the level of training, maybe like annual training or repetitive training for traffic stop situations? Yeah, so our in-service training this year, we had a 2-hour block that focused on traffic stops and the appropriate use of force in a traffic stop. We went through 6 different scenarios. Most of those scenarios didn't result in any use of force at all. We also then trained for a couple hours on our firearms and the proper use of that force. And so it's something we train on several times a year. It's something that's reinforced also in some of our daily training bulletins that we get through Lexipol. So we're constantly training on that. We're constantly aware of that. Supervisors are out there watching officers, checking in with them after
high-risk calls to make sure that force was used appropriately. And then lastly, we do have the complaint process. So if someone feels like a member of our department used force inappropriately, they can avail themselves of that process, and we can look into it in more detail.
Yeah. And this is Assistant.
I saw a hand, Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. Chief Lockhart, when your department reviews the dash cam footage, would it be fair to say that you don't look at that use that as a criteria to investigate when an officer maybe goes for his gun? Would that be fair to say, or do you look at everything and record everything in that aspect?
Chief Rich Lockhart, are you asking if the video system is triggered by a weapon pull?
No, I'm asking, this is Board Member Minor, I'm asking when you all review, say like an officer's situation, do you look at all of the aspects of when he gets out of the car, how he approaches the individual, things like that, and records what you consider key data that could make a individual feel uneasy? And that one of those is pulling their gun or reaching for their gun?
Chief Rich Lockhart, again, anytime we use force, we're going to review that, and that would include a review of all of the data that we have, whether that's patrol video, the officer's written reports, and body camera video. So yes, we will look at all of that whenever we have a use of force.
Do you want to talk about the review panel?
Yeah, so anytime we have, Chief Rich Lockhart, anytime we have a use of force, we have a use of force review committee. And the purpose of that is to, one, ensure that the use of force was appropriate. The other part of that is to make sure that we identify any training issues that may have come up. So maybe the use of force was appropriate, but maybe there's a better technique that we could train the officers to ensure that they are handling things the way they should in the most efficient way. And then lastly, we look for also equipment needs or policy revisions that might be generated from that use of force. Every single use of force gets reviewed by that board.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos. Chief, the question that I'm really trying to get to is, and I heard you say we don't have officers that unnecessarily draw their weapons because they've been trained when they should and they shouldn't. But if someone complained to you and said, look, that's crazy, I didn't do anything, he pulled his weapon on me, my kids were in the car, is that from your point of view a issue concerning use of force as to, hey, did he follow this or not? You know, I mean, I'm just saying that, isn't that an issue in these complaints as to, oh, he did pull his weapon, but should he have pulled his weapon?
Police Chief Rich Lockhart, if we did receive a complaint, as you described, we would look at all of those aspects of it to determine whether or not it was an appropriate use of force.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I have a follow-up question, and I think you said, I know what the answer is, but just wanted to confirm. The 14 uses of force, is there an officer dominance in this, or this is 1-2, 1-2 done?
Police Chief Rich Lockhart, I do not have it by individual officer. I can get that for you. I would imagine if there was a problem that would have been identified, but I don't have that information available to me right now.
It's something that I heard Mr. Santos and Mr. Minor also pointing to is what
if that were something that if we had a signal, so in our IA Pro and Blue Team, we have what we call early warning indicators, and the use of force system is within that. So we would get notified through that if we had an officer who was engaging in multiple uses of force within a defined time frame. We're still tweaking those indicators, but I'm fairly confident, even though I don't have all the information, that we don't have an officer who's used force excessively on multiple instances because it would have triggered an alert in that system.
I was expecting that answer. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions on the use of force? And I know I have to be cognizant we are to the dreaded or the anointed hour.
My other two things should go much quicker. This is Chief Rich Lockhart again. So we've started collecting monthly our community engagement. This is again another report that you'll receive monthly. This is the first iteration of it. So there's not a lot of detail because we just started tracking how many events. And so I just want to call your attention to that.
So I know we had talked about it, and my only comment on this community engagement would be for us to know how many of it is the police department initiative and how many of it is the community requested engagement, and what's the general mix of the people at these community events, so that we are going to all kinds to the entire community rather than a section.
I'll note that, board member Mishra, for next time. It's a mix of both as far as what we're initiated and what we're invited to. And then it's across all communities. So that may be a little harder to track, but we'll track it as well as we can.
Okay, I say that because it'll give the community more confidence that you're proactively doing this. Thank you. Any other? Tanya, you had a question?
I do. So is there a community engagement plan and criteria for that you've set to then engage?
This is Police Chief Rich Lockhart. We will go to anything we're asked to go to. We are trying to, this is sort of our getting back out there. We've got, for this summer, we're going to use our school resource officers as our community engagement team under the direction of Lieutenant Grady. And they're going to be working on a number of different things. So we don't have a formal plan yet. And this reporting doesn't reflect a formal plan. These are things that we engage in because either officers elect to, we get invited to them, or they're interested in them. This summer we'll be a little bit more intentional about it and getting out there with our 3 school resource officers, and we'll be reporting back to you some of those things as well. Part of it will be just seeing what works too, because it's been a couple of years since we've been out there. So we want to get the most bang for our buck. And so those things that work, we'll keep doing. Those things that aren't working, we'll find another way to engage.
Any other questions for the chief on civic engagement, community engagement?
Police Chief Rich Lockhart, if I might, one last thing also. This is one of the 6 questions that I'm asking all the officers in individual meetings is, what's the best way for us to connect with our community? I believe that the best way for us to build trust is to be out in our community and get to know them, let them get to know us in a positive way. And so this is part of our plan for increasing community trust.
Okay, I think, Chief, we are on to our complaints.
We only have 1 complaint to report to you this month. And I'm sorry, it's Chief Rich Lockhart again. This report won't be the same that you'll get every month. Last month, as you know, it was the first time we've ever reported complaints to you. So I reported them for January, February, and March. I only made a verbal report, so there was a request to have that summary put in here. That summary is now in there for year to date through April. So going forward, we'll just give you the month that is appropriate. We won't summarize the whole year. So this month for April, we only had 1 complaint. This was a complaint that came up during the championship parade, and that's sort of the context of what was happening there. There was a disturbance. The officers handled the disturbance, had to get back into the parade because that's where their primary duties were. They couldn't stop and be drawn away, but they did notify an officer to go take a report. So the initial officer didn't take a report. The complaint was about that. Once the person was told the situation, they understood, and so we exonerated the complaint because the officer was on another assignment and would not have been able to take the complaint. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about that one or any of the others for those of you that weren't here last week or last month.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, I was here last month, and I just wanted to tell you, Chief, that individuals unsolicited have told me that they were very impressed that you have started this reporting out of these complaints and having made this special effort, in my opinion, to be transparent, and that the community, at least those that speak to me, are very appreciative. So thank you.
Police Chief Rich Lockhart, you're welcome. And this was one of the reasons that I was hired when I was hired to come here, is to try and improve the relationship between the police and the community. And these are some of the things that we're doing to make sure that that happens. And I appreciate your recognition of those efforts.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief, very much for being here with us. Thank you. And now if I go back to the agenda, where is my agenda? Brandon, help me please with the agenda. Yeah, no?
Yes, so Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, for the fourth item tonight, this will just take a moment, I think, but I believe we are ready to return to in-person meetings with the board. So I just wanted to check the assumption that the board members would like to return to in-person. We will continue to maintain the Zoom option for any member of the public, or in the event that a board member is unable or uncomfortable attending in person, they could attend that way as well. But if the board agrees, I'll go ahead and get the logistics in place to make sure we can start meeting in person, beginning with the June meeting, and we'll continue working down that path. The only other question that I had was just about the venue. We are somewhat limited in that we need to be able to be set up decently for audio and video on Zoom. But I have thought about, and I think some others on the staff have thought a little bit about other places that we could meet, other locations than the City Commission chambers. The chambers are open, and we can conduct the meetings here in person. I think the way it'll probably work is the board members will sit behind us at the dais. So just logistically, that becomes a little bit tricky, as you know. The chief and I will, be turning around to look and talk and engage with you all. And I also think that there's some considerations about the formality of the commission chambers as well. And so we do have other city facilities, such as our parks and rec centers. Our police facility actually has a very nice meeting space, very good Zoom setup. But some of our other more community-based facilities, like the Holcomb Rec Center, East Lawrence Rec Center, for example, are sometimes good locations to accommodate these public meetings. So if there's any thoughts about that, feel free to engage here before the end of the meeting, or shoot me your thoughts by email. Just don't copy other board members on those, and I can work off of whatever feedback I get.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, Brandon, so if one of the board members is out of town, what is the city's policy concerning that member joining by phone or otherwise?
Yes, that is perfectly acceptable. And in fact, Commissioner Sellers, City Commissioner Sellers, had to join the City Commission meeting by Zoom because she's out in Washington, D.C. on business. So this last Tuesday, she participated fully in the City Commission meeting by Zoom.
Thank you.
Board Member Minor.
This is Board Member Minor. I'm for having it at the City Hall, where you all are out there. Maybe you all can sit on the other side or something like that. Yeah. I understand it would make it a little bit difficult neck-wise to be looking at the different screens, but I've always liked the venue at the City Commission area.
Any other comments? And if something comes up, you know where Brandon is, so you
Yes,
easily get in touch with him.
exactly. So hearing no other comments, we'll go ahead and proceed on scheduling the next meeting for in person. And again, those members who need to attend by Zoom can do so, but everybody's welcome to attend in person, and we'll make sure that we're all set up to accommodate that meeting format here.
Board Member Littleton.
This Board Member Littleton, I just wanted to ask before we close out, just to make sure I understand, Brandon, our next steps on the project charter.
Yes. Hey, good question. So I will schedule this for the first available City Commission agenda. I believe that would be, let's see, we were doing the math on that the other day. I think the second meeting of June.
Let's see. Yes, it would be June 7th.
So I believe we'd be able to get it on the June 7th agenda. I need to just double check that with the city clerk and city manager. And I'll communicate back with the board members just as soon as we figure out exactly which agenda it will be on. But we'll definitely push it through the agenda process as quickly as possible.
Go, Stephanie.
This is Board Member Littleton again. For some transparency to the board, I've been communicating by email with the chief and Brandon the last couple of days in thought and theory of, we've come a long way in 3.5 years of trying to get kind of where we're at now and getting this task force or this work group together. And some of and I won't go into this here, but just so we have some transparency that I think Brandon at some point will share with the board my questions about. I'm kind of stuttering here because I'm trying to think how to put this, but the long and short of it is once we get to this work group, and this probably will be a point of contention to talk about is, one is what's our role in the complaint process and such. And if we get to have oversight, how much does that include? Because we've talked about it a number of times with this board about being able to see the investigative file. Obviously, we've signed a confidentiality agreement with the city. We would not be sharing that because of due process and such. But anyway, I've just kind of opened up that discussion because I was trying to recall where we had come from with that, in order to provide all the oversight and being able to speak back to the community, and share our trust that the police department is investigating wholeheartedly and such. So I just wanted to share just in kind of a high overview that I'm in that conversation. And once again, it may be something that becomes, a discussion with the work group in itself with where we go with our ordinance and what our role is. So.
And Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, I am committed to sharing our response with all the board members. We're still doing a little bit of research to be able to respond sufficiently to the question. So as soon as we complete our research and share that with Board Member Littleton, we'll also share that with all the other board members as well.
This is Board Member Littleton again. I didn't want to really entertain any of that tonight, but I did want the board to know that, I have, our best interest at hand here about where we go with that. But once again, I do think that's going to be something that for the work group really to probably work through, how does that look at the end of the day, right? But just something that we talked about so much throughout the last several years on this board. So I appreciate Chief and Brandon entertaining all of my email back and forth, trying to understand, because I've dug through the LPOA MOU and trying to get up to speed for the current one, and read through the personnel from the police officer's manual and all of that, trying to understand it. I was like, it's easier just to go ask you. So thank you for your time on that.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? Board Member Santos?
I had asked, I believe it's item 2 from last month, that I wanted to raise an issue that I've been trying to raise in some formal fashion. And if each member of the board will take the time to review the bylaws and look at the limitations on the ability of the board to investigate a complaint, you will find that the language in those bylaws says that the board is prohibited from considering the credibility of witnesses. And I, for one, find that essentially making the ability of the board to do a meaningful investigation absolutely useless. If you cannot judge the credibility of a witness, what is the purpose of having an investigation? And I would recommend that the board ask the staff to present an amendment, and I don't even remember, and Brandon can tell us who approved those bylaws. I assume it was the commission, to amend that, to remove that provision, so that if tomorrow there is a complaint and we have to investigate, our hands aren't tied to this idea of, oh, fine, you can look at it, but don't consider the credibility of witnesses. That is inappropriate and nonsensical. And I'd ask that Brandon be asked to draft a change to those bylaws and have that approved.
So go ahead, Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, if I recall correctly, that aspect on the credibility is tied into the standard of review. And I think that that's where that's coming from. But I think that in terms of like this request to Brandon, I think it has to be tied to the city attorney's office, because I think there's a rationale that is related to the standard of review that's supporting that. Not to say that I'm pleased with it, but I think that really this is a question for perhaps the city attorney's office to look into this question on the bylaws.
And this is Board Member Mishra, if I remember, in the revised ordinance, we worked to take that sentence off. Board Member Minor, and then come to you, Board Member Santos.
This is Board Member Minor. Yeah, I think that falls into a very strict limitations. You know, are we being judge and jury on a particular thing? And I think that maybe the level of the board that might make it easier for both sides is we establish a criteria of what we can look at and should look at without a lot of deep detail. Maybe, for example, did the officer was a form provided to the officer, if it's this case here, and did he fill it out completely, and did he sign it, things of that nature, but keeping it at a little bit higher level than a very deep-rooted level. But the board would have to determine that and get an agreement by the attorney on how far we can go deep into that.
So, okay, final word, Michael?
Yes.
Board Member Santos.
Yes. Two things. One, the most famous case, or one of the most famous cases ever come out of the Lawrence Police Department, had the issue of, oh, the police department shot my son, and the parents are saying he never raised his hand. It was purely a matter of whether or not who was credible, because in many cases, all you have is one person saying one thing, another person saying another thing. And I'm not opposed to asking the city attorney to give her opinion as to whether or not that somehow is tied to the form of review. But here's the deal, that review is only tied to what the city commission is saying it is, and that is you don't want the board simply substituting its opinion for that of the police department, that all we are supposed to be doing is reviewing whether or not the police department's decision was supported by competent evidence. But we cannot do that unless we have the ability to judge the credibility of the witness. So if we want to start with getting the city attorney to explain why they think it should or should not be, I'd be happy to hear that. But right now, I don't believe that the board has the ability to do its business.
So thank you, Board Member Santos. I think that's a good place to stop and hold this. If we truly want to have a discussion on this, as you have suggested, we should read the bylaws and include it in the agenda items for our, this is June meeting to facilitate discussion. Is that an agreeable solution going forward? I don't want to put a resolution, but I want to say we can discuss it in more detail at our next meeting, and we'll make it a specific agenda item.
This is
Yes.
Board Member Minor. I agree with that mindset that we review the bylaws and we bring that discussion up in June.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts? Board Member Taylor?
Board Member Marie Taylor. So I'm pulled up the bylaws and I think it does tie into the standard of review. So we really do need someone from one of the attorneys from the city's attorney's office to brief on that.
So I should have intervened earlier and said, we'll pass this on to the city staff to take a closer look at it and report to us in June. My apologies for dragging us into this discussion. Sorry.
And Vice Chair, if I may, Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire, I'm happy to bring this up with Tony Wheeler and her staff. I will say they are short-staffed for the next couple of months. And so they may not be able to turn this around in June, but I'll ask her to prioritize it to the best of her ability. So I'm assuming if it's not prepared in June, then they'll be prepared for that discussion in July. And I just think I want to give her a chance to kind of review the history and prepare her thoughts so that she can advise the board sufficiently. So.
Thank you, Brandon. There's no open agenda items, so I need a motion. I'm sorry we went 20 minutes over. I have not been able to hold it to our time. And typically, if we went over, we should have had a motion to go these 20 minutes over. So I apologize again to the board members. Yes, Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? I see a second from Board Member Salvini.
No trouble getting a second there.
It says Board Member Salvini, I second.
Any discussion, anybody? Good. I will start with Board Member Salvini.
Board Member Salvini, aye.
Board Member Minor.
Board Member Minor, aye.
Board Member Santos.
Board Member Santos, aye, and thank you for doing a good job tonight, Sanjay.
Thank you for that. Board Member Littleton.
Board Member Littleton, aye.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board Member Mishra, aye. 6-0. Brandon and Chief, thank you for being there. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alex.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you, Stephanie.